I have a stack of tarot journals that goes back, well over 10 years. And I've developed a habit of journaling all the readings that I do for myself, in part to externalize the reading. I find that writing out the reading and the question is a very important part of thinking through the material that I receive through the reading. It's an important part of reflecting on my thoughts and digesting what I see in the reading. So I've always found that journaling in combination with the tarot has been very effective, and I've always recommended it for people who are reading for themselves to consider journaling their readings, because writing it down somehow takes the abstraction of the reading that you're seeing there in front of you in silence and makes it tangible, gives it form somehow, allows you to articulate your thoughts in the way that you might do when you're reading for someone else. And a couple of years ago, I had been going through a very rough time. I'd been going through some sort of emotional upset and crisis, and I was in quite a dark place. I was going through some stuff, and I had, as I do, I turned to the cards. I had my journal out and my pen ready, and in that moment, as I was formulating this question for this thing that was so upsetting for me, in that moment, the way that I wrote that question, it came out as a prayer. It came out as addressed to God. And so I just went with it. I wrote out this question as a prayer, as a cry to the source of creation. And I then proceeded to interpret the reading, speaking with God. And I had an extremely profound experience as a result. I had this experience that is often suggested by the term divination, which of course means to make divine, to infuse the most transcendental quality of our consciousness, or the most divine aspect of reality into our ordinary experience, which is of course the most profound aspect of divination and the tarot, the loftiest, the most noble perspective on the art, right? And so I had this experience of true divination, of somehow God speaking to me through the cards. And from that moment onwards, I continued with this practice. I continued with when I would do my reading for myself, no matter what the topic was, I would address it to God. I would address it to the Heavenly Father, and then use the reading as a way of connecting with that deeper part of reality, more so in a more conscious way, and somehow the process made it more sacred for me. And I think this may seem a little bit strange. It may seem a little bit odd to think of the tarot as prayer or as an act of prayer, because somehow the more occult aspects of the tarot, the more fortune-telling aspects of the tarot, seems to make us a little bit queasy and uncomfortable about connecting tarot with our religious life in such an explicit way. And maybe because my understanding of God and how I understand Judeo-Christian symbolism and the Western religious tradition as a magician, as an esotericist, has given me a different perspective on the topic, the one that isn't necessarily baggaged with the religiosity and the dark sort of oppressive morality that we often associate with religion, but instead I see the symbolism of the Judeo-Christian tradition and indeed of the tarot itself, because let us not forget the tarot itself, the symbols of the tarot, those emblems arise from the Judeo-Christian tradition, right? And of course, we can see that with cards like the Hierophant, which is the Pope, the Judgment card, which is speaking about the apocalypse. It's speaking about Judgment Day itself, the World card, which is essentially the New Jerusalem, and all the devil, all these things, all these symbols within the tarot are really deep structures within the Western psyche. And for that reason, tarot and magic and Solomonic magic and Christian folk magics and so on have always been a powerful way for me to reclaim the Judeo-Christian spirituality of which we are the inheritors, whether we like it or not, whether we are conscious of the fact that we are operating within that system or not. But working in this way has been a way for me to reclaim it back for myself in a conscious way, in a way that is empowering to me, in a way that re-infuses it with spirituality and direct experience. And of course, this is one of the great gifts of the tarot. It's the ability for us to have an encounter with the spiritual world, have an encounter with the numinous realm, with the divine, through the experience of this powerful sense of being able to basically dream while you are awake, or instigate an omen consciously to interpret through the cards. And this is a very profound mystical act in some ways, if you think about it. It is truly divination. It truly is infusing the divine back into your life. Whether you think of it in Judeo-Christian terms or not, doesn't really matter. You can frame it for yourself really as thinking of speaking to the universe, or maybe thinking of it speaking to the highest aspect of your soul, which you can recognize as divine. You might think of it as connecting to the greater universal consciousness. All these concepts are not necessarily separated. For this reason, I wanted to share this idea with you. Next time you read the cards, try formulating your question as a prayer. Try formulating your question as a cry to the highest aspect of the divine in your understanding, whether you can frame that as nature or consciousness or the universal source or God, the Heavenly Father, the universe, whatever you might decide to call it, however you might want to conceive it. But try writing your question as a prayer, as a call to that most deepest fundamental aspect of reality, and then do the reading and see what happens. See how that changes the experience of the reading for you, right? So this is the first idea that I wanted to share with you today. And then the second idea that I wanted to share with you is something that emerged from this practice very naturally for me. So I started doing this kind of reading, journaling, rephrasing my questions as prayer to the divine. And as a result, this conversation started to develop. And these conversations not only had to do with my concerns, the petty concerns of my own life, my career, my family, my relationships, all the things we tend to turn to the tarot, but I found that I started to ask the cards, and as a medium for communing with that deepest aspect of the divine, the highest aspect of God or the Heavenly Father, the creative source, I started asking very deep questions. I would ask questions like, why is there suffering in the world? Or why is there evil in the world? Or what is right? I would ask questions like really deep questions about morality, things that I was struggling about, things that I wasn't content to have explained to me, explicated to me necessarily through tradition, although that is a source of learning and I think a valid source of moral learning and spiritual learning is to receive it through philosophy, through tradition, whether it's religious, theology, or philosophy. But instead, I wanted to see what God would say to me directly in this way. And the answers really blew my mind. The answers were not only profound in the deepest sense of the word, not only did they speak to universal truths that we often will see in traditions, but they often, these truths would be communicated in a very personalized way from my experience. The truth that was correct for me, the message that the divine had for me about how I should live my life, how I should grapple with the challenges that human beings face existentially as a species and as individuals, and the deepest things that concern us as spiritual beings. I would receive very profound communiques from the source, I felt, things that to this day I will refer back to in my journal for contemplation, for meditation, and then when I read back, I find more is revealed to me by those readings. More profundity tends to come back when I read back over those messages that were shared to me. So this is the second thing that I want to add, is that if you attempt to work with the tarot prayerfully in this way, consider asking not only questions that have to do with your the kind of things that you would normally divine, your relationships and so on, but ask questions about the nature of life, the nature of the universe, the nature of the soul, things that concern all human beings, and things that maybe you are grappling with and are genuinely thinking about. Deep things can be addressed in divination, and I find that you will be surprised at the depth of wisdom that can come from that endeavor, from that process of trying to grapple with these things in this way, and in essence trying to cut out the middleman, trying to cut out the priests and the philosophers and the people that tell us what we should think, but instead go to the source and see what is revealed to us directly. What should we know for ourselves? What is the truth for you in that moment? So, what are your thoughts on tarot as prayer? Have you ever thought about that? Is that something that's happened to you spontaneously? If so, let me know. Right, share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe or to like if you've enjoyed this. And as always, thank you for watching.